A few days ago, I showcased to you guys my first version of Red and Purple Luffy and talked about how much fun it is to play this deck. And I hope at this point you guys have had the chance to pilot this deck as well. Our friends over in Asia definitely have, and some have already started seeing success with the 3-life leader. Yes, there's some that have been topping their standard battles, which is basically equivalent to our locals, and some that have already come first place in larger scale flagship events. On top of that, one of the top players in Asia also uploaded a video with his red and purple Loopy. I'm getting too excited. Maybe that's what we should call him because he's red and purple Loopy. Let's just call him Loopy. We see his red and purple Luffy list going up against full powered Whitebeard. And when I say full powered, obviously I mean that the ones without restrictions, right? They have 4 9-beard, 4 Radical Beam, and 4 4-cost Marco. Upload a gameplay of that. And so in this video, we're going to be looking at all of those lists, the ones that beat the flagship event, the one that took first place there, the one that took first place in the standard battle, as well as one of the top players in Japan uploading his version on his YouTube channel. So we're going to compare it to our version 1 of the list and steal the tech. As I said, we will be stealing as much tech as we can and continuously evolving this deck together. So right off the bat, also his link to his channel and to this video specifically will be in the description if you want to see how the matchup itself ultimately plays out. It's really, really cool. Go ahead and check that out. So here is his list. So obviously I'm not going to harp on too many things, too many obvious things, right? Obviously the 4 Radical Beam, 4 9-cost Newgates, you know, he can run it, we can't, right? Obviously things might change by the time this comes out in which we can run it, but I'm going off the assumption that we can't. But yeah, 9-cost Whitebeard just makes so much sense because that in conjunction with Kid, the defensive prowess is just absolutely insane, right? Offensively, it's nice, but defensively, it just becomes stupid, especially when your leader is only 3 life, and you can ramp the way you can. Yeah, it just becomes a very deadly combo. And for me, I think that even running one of it, similar to how I'm running the 1 Radical Beam, running 1 copy of that Edward Newgate would be great. We see max copies of Jean Bart here. We talked about it in my video as well. We talked about us wanting to find max copies, space for max copies of Jean Bart as well. So nothing too surprising. That is already something that I was planning on implementing. Keeping the same cards that we have as well in terms of Basil Hawkins as well as Khalifa in terms of 2K counter, Basil Hawkins for the ramp. And then it gets interesting. So we have Otama here, who's going to be a 2K counter, but obviously will be able to reduce costs. But on my build, I'm not really playing Otama, rather I'm playing the X-Drake. And yeah, I guess Otama does make sense because Otama is a card that you could use utility-wise, and it's still a 2K counter. So if I only have X-Drake just for the 2K counter value, I might as well just swap this over to Otama. So he's also not running any chump blockers in his build, but rather instead deciding to run Wire. And now if you guys don't know what Wire does, Wire also adds a little bit of draw power to this deck. So Wire is a blocker, but costs 3 Dawn instead of 1 that 2020 Chopper would. You can whenever you return 1 Dawn from your field to your Dawn deck, you draw 1 card and you discard 1 card. So this is going to allow you to dig for your threats a little bit quicker, right? So he opts to run 2 copies of Wire, whereas I run 3 copies of Chopper. I'll go ahead and test out Wire because, like, yeah, it does make sense to just be able to have this body on board. It could be a blocker. Obviously, it can still get KO'd by everything, but so can Higurashi, so can Chopper, right? So it doesn't really excuse anything. But the thing is that it allows you to dig for that extra card and maybe throw away a card that doesn't have counter and get a card that does have counter if you need it when you're in a pinch, obviously it being a blocker as well. So that's one thing that's interesting. I'm also running the Higurashi, so I'm loaded up on blockers where he is not loaded up at all. His only main chump blocker is just going to be Wire, but then he is running the 4 copies of Law as well as 4 copies of Queen. And in our build, obviously, you got to run 4 copies of Queen. And we are also running the 4 copies of Law. So we're on the same page with all of those things. Where things also differ again, obviously we got to run the Luffy, right? Luffy's manager. I don't really need to talk about that. He's just an absolute beast. He's what really makes this deck work. But Thatch, he's also running Thatch as well as Hell's Judgment for his event. So a little bit more defensive focus, a vanilla for a little bit more offense. Whereas for us, we are opting to run Ramp in the form of Lead Performer Disaster, but then also the Jet Gatling for defense. I just like having the Jet Gatling because at 0 cost, but Hell's Judgment is such a powerful card, so I can't get mad at that. And in a way, when I think about it, yeah, I probably would rather have the Hell's Judgment than a Higurashi, so I have no problems dropping 4 copies of Higurashi and putting in 4 copies of Hell's Judgment instead. I think that makes a lot of sense. I could drop copies of Disaster to add copies of Jean Bart, so that way I'm developing a body anyway. So I could drop 2 copies there, add 2 copies of Jean Bart. Then I could still have 2 more copies that I want to drop to play other things as well. Thatch, I don't know. I need to test it. I'm not too sure why, like how good it actually feels. I guess just depending on going first or second, you know, being able to play it and ramp out a body very, very quickly that has 8,000 power. I'm sure that's probably the case, but I haven't tested it myself, so I can't speak too much to it. But this is the list that he came up with, and this is a very, very good player. And this is the list that he came up with. We have a lot of overlap, but a lot of differences. But I think I learned a lot from this list. Definitely going to take the Jean Bart. Definitely going to play the one of Ninebeard. And I will play around with Wire as well. Thatch, we will see. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other lists, shall we? Let's go ahead and take a look at Soraya. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but hey, I tried my best. So this is a 32-player tournament, first place. And as we can see, 4 cost Ninebeard, and then we got a bunch of events. We have 1 Jet Pistol, 4 Radical Beam, which we can't play, 2 Diablo Jump, 2 Fire Fist, 2 Fire Doll, 4 All-Stars, which we're playing, and 2 Hydra, right? So a bunch more events, which is quite interesting. Playing Nami in order to search Straw Hat stuff, because obviously we have the Diablo Jump, we have the Jet Pistol, we have the Radical Beam, we have our Luffy, who is basically what we use a lot of the times to close out games. So you have a ton of search targets. Obviously Sanji could search your 2k counter too. Marco, which is just this really, really powerful card. And again, we don't really need to talk about Newgate or any of that. So this is a more event focused build, which is quite interesting and honestly excites me because man, like I said, when it comes to these new purple decks, the deck building is going to be so much fun. You can express yourself in any way that you want. We can very clearly see that this list, and we'll show the next list after, are different. And then we also see one of the top players in Asia having his list that's different, right? I think that the deck building for this is going to be so much fun. No 2 red purple Luffy decks are going to be cookie cutter the exact same. I'm pretty sure people are going to play different things, and that extremely excites me for this leader. I'm so happy for this. So yeah, his build is definitely interesting. Having the Diablo Jump to sneak up on your opponent, having it also be searchable is also nice by playing Nami in the list as well. I think it's cool. I think it's a cool list. I haven't played around with it as of yet. I think it's cool because he's playing Hydra, which is something that people never play, right? You send back 1 Dawn, give one of your opponent's characters minus 3,000 power for this turn. I think there's potential in this card. I have to try this out, but this list, honestly, doesn't attract me as much as this list does. But, hey man, he came first place out of 32 players. But then if we take a look at Afisu's list, first place in a flagship tournament, we see that things are also kind of similar to our list, but also different. So 3 Newgate, again, obviously we can't run it, but no Radical Beam, and he is running Chopper, kind of like how we're running Chopper. So quite interesting. One thing that I noticed, none of them are running Higurashi, so I think Higurashi is not the way. I think I'm going to go ahead and drop that just because that's a consensus for all 3 of them. No point in having too many chump blockers. The one that won the flagship event has 4 copies of Tony Chopper, and that's about it, right? So I think I'm safe to drop Higurashi, and if I do want to play more blockers, then I think Wire might be the way, just based off what we're looking at. Obviously, the Basil Hawkins is there, the Useless Captain Kidd, the Laws, the Queens, all of those things are similar. So we're seeing similar cards, the Otama, the Sanjis, so our 2k counters. We're seeing that in all of these lists, right? This one doesn't have a Sanji in it, but this one has Otama. And so, again, we talked about that at the start of the video. I'm definitely going to drop the X-Drakes and put in Otama in my list as well, just because it just makes sense. But here we also see him running X-Drake because he just wants a 2k counter value. But let's take a look at Miss All Sunday. This is going to add a little bit more ramp. I tested around with Miss All Sunday, which I talked about in my video before as well. I don't know. The stat line is just kind of meh, but then also it doesn't have counter. And that's the thing that really pissed me off about it, which is why I decided to run Jet Gatling. And take a look at the guy that got first place in his. He ran 2 copies of Jet Gatling, and we also ran 2 copies of Jet Gatling. So, as well as the 4 copies of All-Star. So I'm glad that I was kind of on the same page, or I had the right idea when I was first concocting this build. I'll have to test this. He's only running 2 copies of this. Again, I'm not a big fan of it, but we just went over how the deck building for this can be very, very versatile. So I don't think that there's any right or wrong. But he is running 4 copies of Shanks, which I found is very interesting because I was like, why would he decide to run the 4 copies of Shanks over the 4 copies of Monkey D. Luffy? It's only 1 more Dawn, and it has 1,000 more power. You can KO things. Like, there's so many tools that you could utilize for that Luffy. I still haven't tested it myself, so I don't know why he opts to play the Shanks over the 10 cost Luffy instead. But I think either way, you definitely want to have a big body with Rush. Ultimotor is here as well. I haven't seen this card ever in my life. Obviously, I haven't, but I haven't read it, so let's go ahead and read it now. You send back 2 Dawn. Your leader or one of your characters get 2,000 power during this turn, and then you can draw 1 card. And then if you hit it and trigger, then you could set 1 Dawn as active. So again, adds a little bit more ramp, but it's going to allow you to draw 1 card, which again is going to allow you to dig a little bit more. So I look at Ultimotor, I look at Wire, right? These are cards that are gonna allow you to draw. So again, because this deck really needs its big bodies to close out the games, then maybe I can understand why people are opting to play those types of cards. So I'm thinking if I was to kind of like steal some stuff from this list, I'm also running the Kaido here just because I do like the pop, but you do have to send back 5 Dawn. So maybe, obviously, I'll play around with the ratios. I can't run 4 copies of Edward Newgate, which all of these lists are running 3 to 4 copies of, but maybe I run the 1 copy and then I also substitute the Kaidos and play Shanks instead. So yeah, I'm super excited. These are some of the lists that have been performing. Definitely want to know what your guys' thoughts are on these lists. Let me know in the comment section below. I will be giving you guys my updated red and purpley. I'm just calling him everything today, but it's all good. I do this all in one take. I'll be updating and showing you guys my updated list sometime soon, hopefully with some gameplay as well. And with that being said, I am out. Peace.